The data from my experiments has been incredible.
I gotta be honest, I'm not seeing a real practical use for this.
Look, just by adding an 11th topping option, we've been able to increase our popcorn sales by 8% month over month. The science is clear.
Yeah, not sure this is science. It might just be marketing.
Then why am I wearing a lab coat?
Welcome to Rewind Video. I'm Bob.
I'm Rob.
And we love movies. Good ones, bad ones, old ones, new ones, trashy movies, classy movies. Rob, let's talk about some real popcorn science, shall we?
Finally.
So popcorn's the only grain in the corn family that pops when exposed to temperatures above 180 degrees Celsius. Did you know that?
I actually didn't.
Yeah. I don't know who decided to heat these things in order to see if they would pop and turn into a delicious snack, but here we are.
Somebody very smart.
It becomes even crazier when you factor in the notion that the percentage of water in a kernel is crucial to it popping correctly. And this specific type of corn has to be harvested in the fall to pop in the perfect way.
Amazing.
It's bananas. So, science. It's just a fascinating topic. And it's such an interesting topic that we decided to dive a little deeper. You and I have an important job here at Rewind Video. We have the responsibility of updating the staff recommendation shelf at the store, and each time we rotate in new movies, we adhere to a theme. This week's theme is science.
Need to do some tests to confirm that, Bob.
Mm-hmm. Safety goggles.
Always with the lab coat.
Beakers.
Yeah.
Bunsen burners. All that stuff. So this is your theme.
It is.
Yeah. How did you arrive at this?
I'm a fan of science.
Why not?
Yeah. Why wouldn't you be a fan of science?
Yeah, it's great.
Somehow science has become a point of contention in our stupid society.
Oh, it sure has.
I don't know how. It doesn't, science isn't a product or a set of laws or even a reason why things happen. Science is just a method. It's a process. It's a way to help us understand what's happening.
Right. But a lot of proven science has been debunked by people in Oklahoma.
Well, science can contradict itself. Something can be disproven that we thought had been proven. Even stuff like gravity, which we know exists, we don't really know why. We have some ideas.
Right.
And maybe one day we'll be proven wrong about things that we think we know about gravity. So yeah, it's just science is just it's something that people kind of turn into something it's not.
Yes, it is mysterious, and I
Yes.
like that about science. I
Yeah.
like not understanding certain things, but knowing that, wow, there are people out there who have figured this out, and they've seemed to got a handle on it.
Yeah, well, hopefully. We don't really know.
So, I spend a lot of time here at the store restocking the shelves, rewinding videos, checking customers out. I couldn't help but to notice that science is the only genre in the store that has the word fiction attached to it. It's not like we get romantic fiction, adventure fiction, satanic fiction.
Well, we get all of those things.
We do, but not in an official name capacity.
Yeah,
you know?
well, science fiction has come, it means something else. It's not a movie about science. Science fiction is a movie that is, about technology, about the future, about like what has happened because of, certain technology.
Right.
So yeah, science movies are not science fiction movies generally. They don't have to be. They are generally science fiction movies. I think looking at our movies tonight, mostly science fiction. I can make a case from one of them that it's not science fiction.
I think there's two of them that are more in the
interesting.
horror category.
Okay.
Perhaps.
But we'll get to those.
Yeah.
But usually if there's science in a movie, it's a science fiction movie. But, science fiction doesn't mean there's science in it. Like, there's not a lot of science in Star Wars, for
It's the old
instance.
square rectangle thing.
Yeah, there's no scientists figuring out why a lightsaber works. Like,
There
was presumably at some point in that universe,
I'd
but
like to meet that guy.
not in the actual Star Wars movies.
The last thing I'll say before we actually dive into our picks is that I always find it interesting to see how technology is referenced in older movies that are attempting to anticipate the future. And, you know, we have a whole bunch that have been filmed in the past, and the future date of the movie is already in our past. And it's very infrequent that the prediction is accurate, but it's nevertheless fun to look at.
Yeah, it's always cool to think about what the future will be.
Right.
Which I guess scientists do.
Yes. Well, without further ado, let's talk some science. I'm eager to discuss your first pick. So why don't you get us started?
I'm going to start us out with a movie called From Beyond. 1986. This is directed by Stuart Gordon, who also directed Reanimator.
This guy goes hard in the paint.
Yeah, obviously. This is filed under Supernatural Aphrodisiacs.
Oh, there you go.
Back of the box. A group of scientists have developed the Resonator, a machine which allows whoever is within range to see beyond normal perceptible reality. But when the experiment succeeds, they are immediately attacked by terrible life forms. Tagline, humans are such easy prey. It's passable.
It's fine.
It's on the front of the box. What are you going to do? This is also produced and co-written by Brian Usna, who did Society, which you've brought to the table before.
You know, there's some parallels.
There's a lot of parallels. He produced a lot of horror in that era.
Yeah.
He did. He also produced Reanimator, Dolls, Return of the Living Dead 3.
Oh.
But he also, I mean, it's mostly horror. I mean, almost all exclusively horror and body horror, but he also was a writer and producer on Honey, I Blew Up the Kid. Or I'm sorry, Shrunk the Kids.
That's right. I remember that from when when I plucked Society.
Which again, I ran across that. I'm like, geez, like that's just so weird. It's the only movie like that.
Maybe his original draft of Honey, I Shrunk the Kids was like a hard R body horror movie, and the studios were like, we're going to take a little bit of this out and make it for kids.
Or maybe it was just a nice paycheck. He had a good idea, and he's like, I never had an idea that like didn't involve some fucked up shit. Or maybe it was, maybe the kids shrinking involved some body horror. I don't know. It's also based on an H.P. Lovecraft book.
I get that.
Yeah, very much so. He likes to use creatures or monsters that are beyond our understanding, and they're oftentimes they're riffs on our like insignificance in the universe. And a lot of times he's playing with the idea that science, and like the more science we do, and the more we try to understand the world around us, the more confounding it becomes.
Yes.
Which is true for some science. That is like astrophysics, for instance.
Oh, yeah.
And actually some of that gets into play here, but like stuff like dark matter or dark energy or multi-universes and, all that stuff is like the more you find out about it, the more you think about it, the less sense it makes.
Right.
But the science they're doing in this movie is, I think, pretty rad. They're stimulating the pineal gland. I don't know if it's pineal or pineal, which is, this supposedly has an effect on our perception of reality. And that is a real gland.
Sure.
It originally, they think it was like a photoreceptor. So it actually, was like evolving from like an eye type thing into like this gland that like secretes hormones or whatever. And so it's been called the third eye. It's thought to be like have mystical connections or psychedelic properties or something. So when the scientists decide to stimulate this, they subject themselves to this experiment. They shove themselves into this field, and they're able to perceive these creatures that are just kind of floating around us at all times, kind of like they're just basically demon fish that just swim around us. Like they're around us right now.
Yes.
Yeah, it's happening right now. So it's very much like an acid trip when they do this experiment. And it also allows these beings to interact with the scientist physically.
And they do.
But they don't there's not even like a pseudoscientific explanation for that. They're like, yeah, like you can perceive this thing that's always there. And also now they can touch you. It also shouldn't be overlooked that this lab has a plasma globe in the middle of it. So like, some real science is being done.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's some interesting connections to Frankenstein here because that globe, I feel, like I've seen in the early Frankenstein movies. Pretorius, obviously the doctor's name in Frankenstein. So, yeah.
They're going for a little bit of that, definitely.
Yeah.
I imagine there's some sort of code of ethics for scientists, and if there is, Barbara Crampton's character definitely violates it because she essentially borrows a patient from a mental hospital so that she can specifically so she can recreate the experiment that made him go crazy in the first place. Like, oh, that thing that drove him nuts. We're gonna do that. We're gonna keep doing that to him,
right,
just to see what happens. Another thing I found interesting about this experiment is that it makes anyone who does it super horny.
Super horny
for some reason.
Yeah,
which science doesn't normally do.
No. Then again, you know, you've got Viagra, which is a drug that was discovered by accident. It was designed for something else, and it's like, well,
the
makes
drug,
people horny.
The drug might, but the science, didn't. The science behind it. Well, we don't know that for a fact. Right. I guess. I mean, who's to say? And then she actually becomes like a science junkie towards the end.
Yeah.
You know, she's like, I need to keep doing the experiment, man. Like, right. Even though she knows it's bad for her, she's like, I got to keep doing it.
Yes.
Anytime this machine is running, the frame is filled with this fluorescent pink and blue light, which I fucking love. It's like it's my favorite part of this movie.
Yeah.
Just like when those scenes are happening and just the way it looks, I think it looks incredible every single time they do it.
It's pretty rad.
Yeah.
I mean, the effects in this movie are ahead of their time. I mean, the look of this movie is great.
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar to something like Society. I think this is a little bit more coherent, even in the effects, which is kind of like came at you all at once.
Yes. It's more coherent and yet still quite wacky.
It's pretty wacky. But going back to that light, I love how that's like able to turn it into this different world. Even though the movie kind of takes place in like two different rooms, it's just like it's like the lab and then the closet next to the lab. It's like this very drab setting, but because of that light, it turns it into like this crazy world. They actually, and going back to the body horror too, like they have the literal third eye growing out of characters for a lot of the movie.
Oh yeah, those things are just
like pretty gross, pretty cool. But yeah, I think this movie has some like really cool ideas. It looks great. It has some gnarly, gross practical effects and a healthy dose of science. So I'm putting it on the shelf this week for science.
Dr. Pretorius is perhaps at the center of the body horror here. He's changing forms a lot. Mm-hmm. And I was astounded by how many different, very elaborate shapes this man takes. And it was never not amazing to look at. And it reminded me of a lot of what you see in Society, especially in that third act. But I couldn't help but to wonder if the baton is being passed to you in terms of people-eating movies.
Well, yeah, they do get hungry for brains, I think.
Yeah. There's some eyeball eating.
Yeah, okay. Are they strictly people at that point? Like they're being, you know, I don't know that it's necessary. It's not cannibalism.
Right.
I'm gonna argue that it's not cannibalism because they're being kind of inhabited by these creatures.
I'm just here to warn you, it's a slippery slope. We'll see what you come up with for our next theme, but you know, just throwing up a red flag.
Okay, that's fine. That's fair. I mean, it's, you know, it's also like a body horror movie, which is generally your area as well. So like, who knows? Maybe something's changing here at the table.
Who knows? Yeah. Well, I enjoyed this. I didn't know the Yezna connection or the fact that this guy was also responsible for Reanimator, but it was a fun watch.
Yeah, and good science.
Good science. Well, from Beyond, I am going to take us to 1990. And I'm choosing a movie that we keep on top of the circuit breaker in the back room. This isn't actually on the shelves. The movie I'm choosing is Flatliners.
Sweet.
Back of the box synopsis. 5 medical students want to find out if there is life after death. They plan to stop one of their hearts for a few seconds, thus simulating death, and then bring the person back to life. That is, until the dark consequences of past tragedies begin to jeopardize their lives. Tagline, some lines shouldn't be crossed. Not a great tagline.
I disagree. Well, maybe I'm not going to say it's great. I like that tagline.
You know, in the context of the title of the movie, I get it, but I wish it was working a little bit harder. I'm going to give it a B.
Yeah, it's a solid B plus for me, maybe A minus. I like it. Yeah,
okay.
I like it.
All right.
I mean, after like studying these taglines for as long as we have been, I'm starting to realize that like they're harder than it seems.
They are.
And when you come across one that you kind of like, it's probably going to be one of the better ones you see for a while.
You got to give it credit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this movie flew under the radar for me for a long time. Before I had seen it, I always thought of it as a horror movie, and in some cases it kind of is, but there's nothing genuinely terrifying here.
Have you only recently seen it?
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
This was on my list for a long time, and
Crazy.
finally had a chance to watch it. Felt like a great pick for tonight's theme.
What year is this? 1990?
1990. And this is remade in 2017. Remade-ish, also a slight sequel, kind of.
This was the first movie I remember from video store culture, strangely, because 1990, I was I probably wasn't renting my own videos at that point, but I was aware of what was coming into the house and whatnot, and we would talk about it at school. And this was the first movie that I remember people talking about, like, oh, it's sold out or rented out for the week. It was hard to find for a long time.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's a thing. Like a movie can be so popular
That everybody had.
that all the tapes are gone on a Friday night and Saturday and Sunday. And so, this was the first movie I was like and to me it was like, this is a giant hit.
Right, right.
Massive hit, which it wasn't, but
It wasn't.
It was moderate.
I can see why people would be renting it, though, because when it came out, it had a provocative premise, and the cast is pretty star-studded. We've got Kiefer Sutherland looking and acting rather sinister, which he does. This was directed by Joel Schumacher, who also did The Lost Boys. Kiefer Sutherland has a very similar look in this to how he looked in that movie.
I think it's just how he looked in the 80s.
Yeah, that it probably
like
is.
a vampire.
Yeah. Kevin Bacon's here right after having starred in Tremors. Julia Roberts was in Pretty Woman in the same year, so she's kind of at the top of her game.
So she filmed it before she was a star and then became a huge star.
Exactly. Wow. Yeah.
I mean, it's an A-plus cast.
It is. Billy Baldwin, Oliver Platt, they're all good. And like I said, Joel Schumacher, who hardly needs an introduction, is the director. The story here is pretty simple. These students are obsessed with exploring what happens when you die. And as medical students, they're kind of uniquely capable of reviving someone whose heart has stopped beating. The tension in the movie comes from what happens when these students come back to life after dying. So it seems that the sins these people have committed earlier in life are now haunting them during their second lease on life, and each student is affected by something different. They're all impacted in different ways to varying levels of severity. But ultimately, it's a movie about confronting personal demons, right? Wouldn't you say?
Literally, yeah. That is what it is.
Yes.
Yeah. In fact, we can get into it, but like, this is where I think this movie is. Well, first of all, I don't think this is a science fiction movie because they're doing science.
They're doing science nonfiction.
They're doing science, but it's not a science fiction movie because there's nothing futuristic about it. There's no advanced technology. They're not confronting the consequences of technology.
Right.
And the science they're doing isn't causing anything to change, like as far as technologically or in the future or anything. In fact, it might not even be supernatural. It might all be in their heads.
It might all be in their heads, yes. Which is great.
Right. So it may be a science supernatural movie.
It might be.
But like maybe just a science crazy people movie.
Quite true.
But Kiefer Sutherland is not just a doctor. He's not just a scientist. He's a mad scientist.
Oh, quite.
He's a classic mad scientist, which you might miss if you're not ready for it.
Right, and he embodies all the characteristics. His apartment is fancy and clean, and he dresses kind of like he talks like a mad scientist.
I mean, but the main thing that makes him a mad scientist is he's like, kill me and bring me back.
Yeah. We're not even going to talk much about it. I just want to do it. We're going to do it tonight.
We're going to do these experiments. I love how the movie just starts, though. It's just like they've already decided they're going to do it. Mm-hmm. Just like we need to videotape. We're like, this guy, he's got to get the team together at the last minute, but they've already had these conversations.
Oh, yeah. They drop you in after some things have already taken place. There's a lot about the style of this production that I like. Akin to what you get from Schumacher. He's a little bit flamboyant in his set design, and I would say it's almost a little distracting here because the medical school that these students attend kind of has this high art quality to it rather than like stark white hallways. And,
it's like a deco.
Yeah.
It's like a deco hospital, and there's no lights.
None.
Until they get into the room. And I understand that like this was a long time ago.
Yeah.
But the 80s, like the hospitals were lit pretty well. Like
For sure.
fluorescent light existed.
Yeah.
This isn't the 1920s.
No. Yeah. It definitely has like World War I hospital vibes.
Yeah.
And I know that they're conducting this experiment in like a back room or like closed off portion of the school, but like
It looks like a closed off library or
Yeah.
like maybe even like part of the sewer system.
yeah, because it's like leaking and there's all sorts of wacky stuff happening.
Leaking pipes directly onto the fuse box.
Right. So why did I choose this? I love the science here. To your point earlier, isn't something futuristic or outside the realm of possibility. It's simply medical students using their medical knowledge to experiment in a forbidden fashion. And they're seemingly using real techniques to stop a person's heart and later revive each other. It's believable. I think that adds to the suspense. And, what happens after they come back to life may be more of a work of fiction, but the science isn't dubious. And in fact, the idea of cooling a body actually aids in resuscitation, and that's a big part of how they pull this off. Apparently, keeping a body at a certain temperature can aid in resuscitation by taking it from like 5 minutes to 30 minutes. So they did their research when they were looking into how this was going to be depicted on screen. But I think there's also another aspect of science being explored here, and it concerns what happens to the body after it's deprived of oxygen and the heart stops beating. The director wants to answer this question of what happens after we die, and it's a subjective take, but it's nonetheless thought-provoking, and I enjoyed that. So Schumacher is on record having said that the thesis of this movie is you're not to tamper with death. If there's anything we're supposed to learn about it, it'll be revealed after we die. And there's some religious overtones here that I think fuel that thesis a little bit.
Very much, especially like some of the scientific questions that they are asking are kind of weird because it's like, Kiefer Sutherland will, he dies and he comes back and he explains these visions that he's had while he was like supposedly in death. Mm-hmm. And they immediately jump to like God and this and that. And I'm like, what? He didn't say anything about any of this. Like, why are they talking about all this religious stuff? They just kind of like shove that in there a little bit.
And it seems especially weird for medical students.
Right. Which is like, well, because I had these hallucinations while I was dead, or like maybe not even while you were dead, while you were like about to die and then, or while you're coming back. They don't really know.
They don't know.
And so somehow they're like, well, how can you believe that if you are an atheist? It's like, are you guys, come on, like you don't know how this works?
Yeah, of course, right.
You had a dream.
Yeah, that's what it seems like the explanation should be to me.
Yeah.
So interestingly, there were two other movies that dealt with life after death or near-death experiences in 1990. We also got Ghost and Jacob's Ladder in the same year. Critics like this acknowledge that it could be a little bit polarizing to audiences. It comes in at a slightly lower than expected 3.1 on Letterboxd, but for a science theme, I think it's a great entry that deals with a grounded approach to medical science while raising some thought-provoking questions about life after death.
This movie's great.
Yeah.
It's such a ridiculous, awesome premise.
Yeah.
That is kind of only possible in like the late 80s, early 90s. It's like, what if you had medical students that were just like, let's kill ourselves? And then you get a fucking great cast. I mean, it's, it has some weak points, but whatever. I'm fine with it.
I thought it was really interesting and a little bit annoying how they were constantly just trying to like one up each other on how long they would stay under in order to determine who would go next with the experiment. Yeah. Because my feeling is that if we're going to do this together, we're all going to get a chance. And Julia Roberts keeps getting shafted.
Right. And then plus like they're all like, well, I'll just keep going longer. It's like, well, how does that make this better? Right. Because like if someone else is saying like, I'll go for 3 minutes, or it's like, okay, cool, but like we don't know what 2 minutes is like yet. Right. And also having you die while you were doing our experiments pretty much A, puts us all in jail,
Yeah.
and B, like ends the experiments.
Yes.
So like let's go step by step, but they're just they're kids, they're just going crazy.
Yes. Yes. Well, check it out if you haven't already.
It's so good. I had forgotten how good this was.
Good. I'm glad you liked it.
Okay, I want to bring us to a more recent film, to 2016. This is Arrival. This is directed by Denis Villeneuve, I believe.
I think that's it.
Not Dennis Villanueva.
Right.
This is filed under House Calls.
House calls.
Back of the box. Taking place after alien crafts land around the world, an expert linguist is recruited by the military to determine whether they come in peace or are a threat. Tagline, why are they here? Yeah, it's the job done.
Yeah.
So Amy Adams is the linguist, Jeremy Renner is a physicist, and together they attempt to establish a way to communicate with these aliens that have just landed here.
Right.
And these aliens are just sitting there, just waiting for people to do something.
Yes.
And it's up to these scientists to find out what their deal is. And to paraphrase Matt Damon from The Martian, they have to science the fuck out of the situation, because otherwise it's going nowhere.
Yes.
This isn't a matter of studying an unfamiliar human language and trying to communicate with people. There's like no context here for where they're starting. There's no way to. There's no base of knowledge that they can start with.
Right.
The aliens don't look like us. They don't act like us. They don't sound like us. They don't communicate in any way that's similar to the way we do. And a great illustration of the task at hand is when Amy Adams has to describe how difficult this is, because she's like, okay, we have this question we want to ask them. Like, what is your purpose on Earth? Okay, well, like every word of that question is a problem for us, like how do we communicate that?
Yeah.
Well, how do you do that with you don't even know, like they don't know what words are. They don't know what questions are. They don't know what any of these nouns are. They don't know what a noun is.
They don't even know what body language is. So you
Yeah.
can't even like make a, why are you here? Yeah.
I mean, because they're not even, they don't have bodies that are anything like our bodies.
Right.
It's hard to understand anything about them.
Yes.
So like they have to do science just to figure out how to ask a question, or if a question is possible to ask. So this whole movie is just like this puzzle. And the characters are figuring out this puzzle, and the movie itself is a puzzle. It's like this non-linear puzzle where all the pieces are already in place, but they haven't like manifested yet. They're all there, And I love how this movie brings us along for like every step of the story.
Yes. It would be easy to gloss over some of what they go through and kind of skip ahead and summarize or montage the fuck out of things, and they don't do that. And
well, I mean, they do, but they let us in. I mean, obviously, we're not there for like the data analysis,
right. Yeah.
But like they explain it a lot as they're going. They're like, and there's moments where they're just like, we don't know what the fuck we're doing. Like, there's no way this is gonna work. It's never, So the characters, so they're solving this mystery, and the audience is also solving this mystery. But like, it's at the same pace, and like the way the story is told is like so brilliant. We make discoveries along with them, and like it feels like we're doing science, even though we're not. We're just kind of like doing the science along with them, and it's like very satisfying. It's like, oh yeah, I figured it out myself.
Yes, yes.
And it never stops. Like up until the very end of the movie, there's things to figure out. And it also does a great job of conveying how scary all of this is, without making it like menacing. It's just like this feeling of like not knowing what the fuck is going on. And it's just, especially like these things are just hovering above us.
Yeah.
Not really asking anything, and just they're just there.
Right.
They're doing the scientific research from nothing too. And so they're starting with a blank slate, which is also very scary. It's like, okay, cool. Like we have to figure out how to communicate with these aliens. Where do you start? Like, oh, I don't know. Like, what should we do? Like, let's just show them a picture of a cow or something. Like, who knows?
Yeah.
So, like, sometimes scientists have to get creative to get things going.
Yes.
This movie, strangely though, I think, seems to not understand that linguistics is a science. You know, even though it shows linguistics as a science, there's a part of the movie where at the beginning when Amy Adams and Jeremy Renner meet, and Jeremy Renner is trying to, I don't know, like show he's all big physicist guy or whatever, and he's like, well, the cornerstone of civilization isn't language, it's science. Right. It's like, well, first of all, fuck you. Like, how does science exist without language? I wouldn't even know how that's possible.
Exactly.
But also, like, okay, but like linguistics isn't. You're talking to a scientist when you said that.
Yes.
But then also later, when Amy Adams is talking to her daughter and she asks her a question or whatever, and she's like, it's a science question. Ask your dad. It's like, lady, you're a scientist.
You're a scientist.
Did you forget? Credit. Yeah. But I think it seems like it's framing these two scientists as like linguistics versus science. And I think they thought maybe the audience wouldn't understand science, except like, oh yeah, physics is science, language is language. You know? And
so two different things, but not.
But then clearly they're doing linguistics the whole movie too. So I don't know.
Yes.
But I think this is a science fiction masterpiece. I think it's easily one of the best movies of the last decade. And it's an excellent look at how science can actually improve the human experience. And I think it definitely deserves a place on the shelf this week.
Such a beautiful movie.
It's amazing.
It's shot. It's breathtaking in how it's
great
it's shot.
Score.
Yeah,
looks great.
And you know the tension is palpable, but also believable. You know, like the notion of science being at odds with political and military interests is exactly something that I think would be happening if we were visited.
I think the way they depict how all of that interacts with itself is very accurate. How like what the government response would be to this, and what the scientific response would be, and like what the public's response. Even though you get very little of some of that, I think the way that like everything is cordoned off, and the way the communication works, and the way that everything just kind of reacts to this crazy thing that happened on Earth, I think all of that is like very believable.
Yes. I loved this movie. I'm glad I had a chance to watch it again. So bravo on another fine entry to the shelf. I am taking us to 2006. This is my most recent movie from tonight's picks, or at least mine. And I'm choosing Children of Men, which is from the What to Expect When You're Expecting section of the store. Back of the box synopsis. In 2027, in a chaotic world in which humans can no longer procreate, a former activist agrees to help transport a miraculously pregnant woman to a sanctuary at sea where her child's birth may help scientists save the future of humankind. Tagline, the future is a thing of the past. You can attach that tagline to literally any time traveling movie. So I'm not thrilled that it's on the front of the box here.
I think in the context of the story,
it works.
It works.
It also works for Back to the Future.
Yeah. That's true. It could be kind of generic, but I think the fact that this isn't a time travel movie,
it's not,
and in the context that they're referring to is like I think that's fairly clever without being annoying.
So the further that we get from this movie's release, the more I am impressed by it. It's bonkers that this film is almost 20 years old. I think that it could have been released last month, and it would have been. I wouldn't have thought twice about it because it looks amazing. It's grounded in enough reality that it doesn't feel dated.
It seems very relevant.
It does. It really does. I think this is going to endure as being a rather timeless film. And it comes from Alfonso Cuarón. I'll see anything that he makes. He's become one of my favorite directors. This is one of the first films where he begins flexing those muscles in terms of continuous long takes, which became a trademark of like Gravity. What he does here is also a little more nuanced. There's a lot of handheld camera work. It has a documentary style feel at times, especially during some of the combat sequences. A lot of just running around following these people.
Like war photography.
Yes. It's fucking beautiful. The back of the box is brief, but it says everything that you need to know about this. In fact, I don't even want to elaborate on it because the emotion and the storytelling detail that's woven into these broad strokes that summarize the plot, I think make the movie magical. We've got Clive Owen, who is wonderful in the cast. And it's interesting because he seems to have disappeared, but he's great in this. I don't know what happened to Clive.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Literally don't know.
We also get Julianne Moore, Michael Caine, Charlie Hunnam, Chiwetel Ejiofor, Danny Houston. Everyone is stellar in this movie. So why did I choose it? So many fucking reasons. But I'll start with science. This movie drops us into a world where science has failed mankind. And I think that's fascinating because we don't know why humans can't procreate, but what we can surmise is that after 18 years, science has arrived at no solution. And, we get brief glimpses of tech that suggests that we're in the near future. But what fascinates me most is that science can't get the people in this movie out of the problem that they're facing. And it's so rare to see a film that isn't afraid to confront the notion that science is failing us rather than moving us forward, because that's often what you see.
Yeah, I mean, it can't solve all of our problems.
No.
I think that's something that, people forget about science. Like, oh yeah, we'll just do some science and figure this out. It's like, well, sometimes science will tell you that this problem can't be solved.
Right. From a broader perspective, there's nothing I don't like about this film. The way that it's shot, the look of the film, the performances, the story in general are all top notch. I ran into a quote from Alfonso Cuarón that I really appreciated about the subject of this story. He said, "I didn't want to make a film that ends when the credits roll. I wanted to make a film that when the final credits do roll, that's really the beginning of the story." And I think that's true. The title card pops up right before the credits and you're like, I just want more.
Yeah.
It
probably doesn't end great for humanity, though. I mean,
probably not. We get a vibe.
Just a numbers game. It's probably not going to turn out great. You got one chance, it seems like.
They allude to the fact that the rest of the world is just fucked, because I think there's a news headline or something like that that's like, Britain soldiers on. The rest of the world is in shambles. And
doesn't seem like Britain has it figured out either.
No, it definitely does not. But there's another quote that I wanted to bring up from Cuarón, and he talked a lot about making this, but it sticks with the idea of storytelling, particularly the fact that the reason for infertility is never explained. When asked why he didn't reveal this, Cuarón said, "There's a kind of cinema I detest, which is a cinema that is all about exposition and explanation. It's become a medium for lazy readers. Cinema is a hostage of narrative, and I'm very good at narrative as a hostage of cinema." I bring this up because I love how painstakingly deliberate the director was at telling this story. The film rewards multiple rewatches. Every headline of a newspaper or bottom line on the news broadcasts kind of provide tiny details into what's happening in this world.
Great world building.
It's so good.
From top to bottom, every single little thing you see in the movie, it tells you where you are. They don't have to do any exposition.
None.
I mean, a little here and there, but it's all right there on the screen.
Yes. And if you pay attention, you just get more. Nothing's spelled out overtly, but everything that is there provides just texture, and it's so well done. The last thing I'll say about science and Children of Men is that the practical movie-making science that went into this is something that I really love. This is one of those films that's so careful about special effects and CGI. It's definitely here, but it's practically imperceptible. That's, to me, why you can watch this in 2023 and it feels like a new release. The CG is measured and woven into the story rather than feeling like the focus of a massive set piece. Mm-hmm. So I could talk ad nauseum about Children of Men, but I'll stop here and say watch it, rewatch it again. It never stops being rewarding. It's got a 4.3 on Letterboxd, and I think it's a masterpiece.
It's really good. It also shows humanity's inability to solve problems or to confront them for what they really are. This seems like a problem that if people would have been honest about it and would have really looked at it, be like, okay, we can figure out a way to at least make this not so bad. But instead, they're like, well, yeah, it just descends into chaos because that's what people do.
Yes.
Because they just can't accept change.
It's funny to think back to the way America was in 2006 and the way America is now. And we're closer to 2027 than we've ever been. And I actually feel like we're closer to the world that this
Yeah.
depicts than we've ever been.
And it doesn't have to be this specific problem, but yeah, it's the same thing. It's just like if something radically changes and like people just refuse to accept it, then like this is what will happen.
This is absolutely
what will happen. I will say there's not a lot of science in this movie, but there's some actual science taking place just off screen if you look close enough. Because Michael Caine is developing his own weed strains.
Oh, yeah?
Michael Caine is playing Willie Nelson, basically, in this movie. And he's got his own weed strain that he, like, they don't show him doing the science, but, like, it pretty much seems like he developed it himself through, like, his own horticulture at home. So he's, like, doing experiments and taking this weed and crossing it with this one and see what it's like. And eventually he came up with strawberry cough.
Which is a real strain, I think. Like in
know.
our world.
Yeah. In his world, I think he came up with it. Maybe I'm wrong about that. It seemed like he invented it because he was pretty proud.
I can believe that. Yeah. Yeah. You know, I did choose this because it seemed like the science that we aren't seeing has not done its job. But you are right. There is some science that we are seeing that is working swimmingly for Michael Caine.
He's great.
Yeah, he is.
Okay, I'm going to take us to the new release shelf over here.
Oh boy.
This movie is called They Cloned Tyrone. It's from this year, 2023. This is directed by Jewel Taylor. This is his first movie.
Yeah.
But he did write Creed 2 and the new Space Jam movie. So we'll try not to hold that against him.
Right.
This is in the Subterranean Subterfuge section. Back of the box, a series of eerie events thrusts an unlikely trio onto the trail of a nefarious government conspiracy lurking directly beneath their neighborhood. Tagline, beware cheap imitations.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, it works.
Yeah.
This stars John Boyega, Teyonah Parris, and Jamie Foxx as a drug dealer, prostitute, and pimp, respectively. And they find out that their neighborhood is being experimented on, essentially. So the cast is outstanding. They have great chemistry together. It also features
they do have great chemistry.
Kiefer Sutherland as a bad guy.
Yes.
So he's the star of today's episode.
Bad guy twice.
Jamie Foxx, his character was the 1998 Pimp of the Year at the Players Ball, which is a real thing. It was depicted in the Chappelle Show skit. But I didn't know until looking into it. Apparently, it was actually started after the movie The Mac came out in 1973. Which
is that right?
Blaxploitation movie, not starring but featuring Richard Pryor. So I guess some pimps saw that movie and they had like a pimp's ball in the movie, and some real pimps saw that. They're like, we should do that.
Great idea.
And it's a great idea, and it's still going on to this day. They still do it.
Oh,
there's a heavy blaxploitation influence here, but it's not quite a parody. It's just a heavy dose of the style.
Yeah, I think the fact that there's some unexpected genre elements isn't even out of place. It's unexpected, but it's not the first time we've seen blaxploitation steer out of the normal lane.
Yeah, but it's not even like what is Dolomite Is My Name, which was like a take on that, or what was that, Black Dynamite,
right,
which was very much like a spoof. This is just kind of like, we'll just like sprinkle in a little bit of that flavor, but it wasn't overwhelming.
No, I agree.
So like after Boyega, who's the drug dealer, he gets killed, and then the next day he's just like back as his normal self. Like he has no recollection of what happened, and it's because he's a clone that the government has like developed to deal drugs, which to me is a major flaw in their plan.
Yes,
because like drug dealers get killed, and like people see that happen. You kind of have to explain it. They need a better plan, but it's working for them now. Like no drug dealers or pimps ever died before. So the government is like not only supplying the drugs to the neighborhood, but also the drug dealers. There's an endless supply, which again, they probably wouldn't need to do.
No.
Somebody wants to make that money.
Indeed.
But the cloning was only one phase of this experiment. There are drugs in the chicken that the neighborhood eats, in the hair straightener and the grape soda.
It's everywhere.
So like the drugs are for mind control. They're for behavior modification. Obviously, it's evil to put drugs in people's food without them, knowing it. but like this chicken looks good as hell. I gotta be honest. Like it looks so good. And like fried chicken with drugs in it sounds super fun.
Like an improvement
Yeah,
on fried chicken.
like
I didn't think it could be improved.
I mean, fried chicken's great. Imagine if there were drugs in it. I mean, you could definitely market that. You could sell that.
Yes.
I'm interested.
I would buy it.
So this scientific experiment it's got like the giant scientific lab and the complex under the neighborhood. It's like this great blaxploitation trope. There's this vast conspiracy by the man, which is like either the government or corporations, and they're oppressing the black community, right? And there's this vast conspiracy, but it's always like being coordinated locally in these movies. Like, it's like in this case, it's right under their feet. It's like there's this global cabal that controls every aspect of life. It decides the winners and losers, and also like it's being run out of an office in our neighborhood, which I always thought that was like hilarious. Where it's like, oh yeah. It's like, oh, they have an office next door. Like there's a guy over there. It's just like a guy, And that's kind of what's happening here. Like, oh yeah, it's just like this vast government conspiracy. It's just a bunch of like, white dudes that live in the basement.
It's funny to hear you kind of explain the plot to this, because if I hadn't seen it, I'd be like, this feels like it would need to be a 12-episode series of a show. But they pack it in and they do it well, and it works.
I'm glad it's not.
Yes.
Honestly, it's a little bit too long. It's
a
like a lot of Netflix movies. It's like you could have cut 20 minutes, but I guess Netflix just doesn't have somebody to tell their directors that, because like every movie they make is 20 minutes too long. So like it's a little padded or whatever. A blaxploitation movie is about like we got to show like the man is sticking it to us, and at the end of the movie we stick it to them. And that's what happens.
Yes.
And like it gets a little silly in the third act. They basically January 6th the science lab or whatever, but like but like it works. Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah.
As an aside, I think this might be one of the best hair movies of the year.
Oh, it's a good hair movie.
The lead trio in particular, Jamie Foxx is fantastic. I mean, everyone's got some fucking great hair, great clothes.
Yes. I got to applaud John Boyega for his choice of films to star in, because you've got, I mean, obviously he was in the new Star Wars movies, but prior to that we had Attack the Block, which you brought to the shelf. Now it's clear that he has a penchant for science fiction, or just like genre films. And
this also really shows how dirty the Star Wars movies did him.
Oh yeah.
And like what a waste he was in those movies. It's like agree. You had this guy that, I don't know, man, like not to get back into it, but like he was so wasted in those movies. His character is terrible, but I think this movie's a blast. I think the cast is awesome. There's some laughs, great science elements, great science fiction elements. It's not exactly about cloning, but that's a little part of the movie, actually.
Yeah.
But yeah, these are real science experiments. Some truly evil, realistic science, I think. And,
except for the fried chicken.
Except for, yeah. I mean, at least let me know.
Yeah.
Don't drug me without my knowledge.
Put it on the menu.
Yeah, exactly. They looked like they were having a great time eating it. It's by a new director who seems to have some things to say, and he's got a style to go along with it. So I'm putting this on the shelf this week for science, and I think it definitely belongs up there.
This doesn't feel like it was shot by a first-time director. It feels like there's some experience.
Yeah.
This guy knows what he's doing, so I'll be curious to see what he does next.
He's definitely got a voice. I hope people check it out.
Yeah. Good pick. I'm going to round things out with 1995's Strange Days, plucked from the POVR section of the store. Back of the box synopsis. In the last days of 1999, ex-cop turned street hustler Lenny Nero receives a disc which contains the memories of the murder of a prostitute. With the help of bodyguard Mace, he starts to investigate and is pulled deeper and deeper in a whirl of murder, blackmail, and intrigue. Can the pair live to see the new millennium? Tagline here, New Year's Eve 1999, anything is possible, nothing is forbidden. Yeah.
I bet in the 90s that made more sense.
Perhaps. So Catherine Bigelow has only directed a handful of films. Most people know her probably from Hurt Locker or Zero Dark 30, but she also directed this.
Point Break. What are you talking about?
Oh, well, yeah, there's that too.
Easily her best movie.
That's true. Even though this is very difficult to find in 2023. Obviously, we have it on the shelves. I watched it a bunch when it was released in the 90s, and it was fun to revisit for tonight's theme. I'm going to just...
This is my first time.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah, this was a frequent rental for me. I'm going to say, trigger warning, there are multiple scenes involving rape in this movie. It's nothing like irreversible, which we talked about recently, but it has the potential to upset some viewers. James Cameron wrote the screenplay for this, and the fact that Bigelow directed is a reflection of they were in a relationship at the time and, developed this together. While I chose this for science, it's a great film for people who don't like Ralph Fiennes because you get to see him get his ass kicked in about every other scene in this movie. Ultimately, this is a murder mystery, and it's a good one. I think while it takes place in the near future from when it was filmed, 4 years after it was made, it's another film that doesn't foist a bunch of imaginary technology on us. There's only one piece of tech that's fictional, and it's something of a centerpiece to this movie. So that's the science element. This technology was developed to give the world access to these headsets that allow you to relive and feel an experience that another person has recorded from their point of view. So
it's like a neural YouTube.
Yes.
I don't know how else to describe it.
Yeah, it's kind of like VR, but you're not wearing a headset.
You're actually like jacking in. It's basically being John Malkovich.
Yes,
but for like a whole bunch of different people. Whenever it's like whenever you want.
Yes,
YouTube
100%,
for that.
100%. And yeah, you're seeing things unfold through another person's eyes. You see what they're seeing, you feel what they're feeling. And in the movie, as the back of the box states, the technology allows the characters to witness the murder of someone close to them. They spend the movie trying to uncover who captured the footage. So I mentioned that Ralph Fiennes is in this. But the rest of the cast is also great. Juliette Lewis is here. Tom Sizemore is good. Angela Bassett. There's also Michael Wincott, who was the villain in The Crow. I love this guy. I mean, he's a character actor. He's so good.
Every time. He's got such a great voice.
Yeah.
Such a great face.
Yeah. He's got that like scratchy voice. Yeah. I mean,
it's like this scratchy voice that's also booming at the same time. I don't know how he does it.
And he's got that amazing British accent. He's just fucking phenomenal. And it's funny because I think this has some tonal overlaps with The Crow. Just this weird world where things are chaotic and everybody listens to industrial music.
It's a 90s thing.
It is a 90s thing, yeah.
That's how you knew you were someplace cool.
Right.
Industrial music was on, and then like shadows, not much light.
Exactly.
Floor was wet.
Bad things outside.
Yeah.
So why did I choose this? This is another movie that's restrained with how it incorporates science. We get this tech that doesn't exist, but it's believable, and it's here to present a compelling murder mystery in a way that the audience hasn't seen. So this feels like the opposite, in my opinion, of something like Minority Report, which sets out to do something similar with a murder mystery, but overwhelms the audience with visions of the future and all the fancy technology that might exist later on. But all of that, takes a back seat to storytelling here, and I much prefer this approach. It's interesting to watch this almost 30 years after it was made because it's a film that now takes place in the past while also showing us a future that we haven't experienced yet because this technology is still, a figment of our imagination.
Kind of. It's kind of like TikTok. Like if you can hook up TikTok to your brain, it's kind of that.
Yeah, it is kind of that.
We're not that far, maybe.
Yeah. I do think that one of the things this movie does well is character development. We really get to know everyone at the center of this film. Unfortunately, that makes it feel overly long. It's a 145-minute movie that should be more like 90 to 100 minutes.
It's too long.
It is too long.
It's too long.
I'll still sit through it. I maybe had more patience for this when I was younger, but yeah, it could be shorter.
It has too many ideas. I don't think enough of them are fully formed.
Right.
And it's hard. There's an hour and 45-minute fucking banger in here.
Oh yeah.
And I think the way it is now, it just doesn't quite work for me. I don't know what the reason was.
Yeah.
That they couldn't figure out a way to make it work. It's almost like James Cameron wrote a script that he would be used to making, and then he knows how to like whittle down his ideas in a way.
Yeah.
That like other people don't.
It's interesting because I read that when he was developing this, his wife at the time was very interested in making it, and James Cameron was responsible for the love story elements, and Catherine Bigelow added in like the grit and the crazy crime stuff, and it felt like I wouldn't have expected James Cameron to tackle the love story.
Yeah, it does kind of feel like 3 or 4 different movies, and they couldn't quite figure out like what the big ideas were, because like there's some really genuinely interesting things that they're going for.
Definitely.
I just don't. It feels like they couldn't land on like 2 or 3 that were like they really wanted to do, and they're just like, let's just do them all. You know?
Right. This movie does feel like it's inherently tied to a country that has grappled with the Rodney King murder and has just come out of the O.J. Simpson trial.
Yeah.
So
it seems like they were. That was a very overt thing that made me think what I was just saying, because it's like. Obviously, there's like this undercurrent of racism with like the cops and the rapper that got killed, whatever. Like there's this undercurrent thing, and then like at the very end, they like try to like slip in, like make it like really like overt. And it was like, okay, guys, there's 5 minutes left of this movie. Like we don't have time for this.
We don't.
And it was just one of those things. It's like one more big idea you're just gonna shove in there with 5 minutes to go in this movie. It's like, okay,
come on.
Yeah, but yeah, it's there's again really interesting ideas here.
Yeah. Critical reception was divided. Ebert loved it, though. His 4-star review referred to it as a technical tour de force. He went on to say that Bigelow is able to exploit the idea of what is happening. She forces her audience to deal with the screen reality instead of allowing us to process it as routine action. This has a 3.8 on Letterboxd, which surprised me. I think for me, that's about right. I know that there's some nostalgia kicking in for me, but I think its choice incorporation of science makes it my third and final pick for the evening.
It's definitely a movie that's been reclaimed a little bit. People have gone back to it and say like, "Oh, this is actually a classic," and like that's cool. That, people think that. I don't think there's a lot of actual science being done in this movie, but I think it maybe Catherine Bigelow was doing an experiment on how miscast Tom Sizemore could be. I like him in this movie. I like him every time he's in a movie.
Yeah.
But you can't have Tom Sizemore be like the sidekick buddy that like turns out to be the like the bad guy at the end. It's like, well, you knew the whole time. It's Tom Sizemore.
It's Tom Sizemore. He's not a good guy.
The trick would be if he wasn't,
Right.
He's definitely a bad guy.
Well, Rob, tonight we are not looking to blind people with science. In fact, we're interested in giving people something compelling to watch. And the 6 science-focused films that we chose are From Beyond, Flatliners, Arrival, Children of Men, They Cloned Tyrone, and Strange Days.
If you like websites, check out rewindvideopod.com to follow and subscribe. That's also where you can send us your questions, comments, or even suggestions for future episodes.
From here, we're going to swap our lab coats for some sequined jackets as we focus on next week's theme, which is showbiz.
Oh.
Yes. I'm excited about this.
I'm going to wear my fancy pants.
As usual, we'll have 6 films to recommend. In the meantime, feel free to stop by the counter for a movie to watch, and we will see you next time.
Be kind. Recommend. Hail Satan. Hail Satan.